Daniel Morrison stood near the large window of the human embassy station. He watched the last transport ship getting ready to leave. The engines were warming up, making a low humming sound that vibrated through the metal floor. Behind him, the Galactic Council building sat on the next station over. Its tall crystal towers sparkled against the black space and distant stars. Helen Carter walked up beside him. She was the second in command at the embassy. Her voice was calm and steady, but her hands shook a little. She clasped them together to hide it. "Are you sure about this decision?" Helen asked. She already knew the answer, but she had to ask one more time. Daniel nodded without turning away from the window. "We tried everything, Helen. We sent requests. We made appeals. We offered compromises. They ignore us unless they need something from us. Humans have been nothing but tools for them to use." The Galactic Council was very old. It had 17 different alien species as members. They had controlled galactic politics and trade for thousands of years. Humanity joined 50 years ago, and it seemed like the older races regretted that choice now. Humans were different. They asked too many questions. They changed things too fast. They did not follow the old ways without thinking. For 5 decades, humanity worked hard for the Council. Human engineers fixed power problems in 12 different sectors of space. Human doctors found a cure for the Vryn plague that had killed millions. Human diplomats stopped 3 wars before they could start. Earth asked for help only once during the outer colony crisis when human settlements were dying. The Council voted on it. Every single member voted no. Their reason was simple and cold. Humanity needed to learn its place in the galaxy. Daniel felt anger rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. Anger would not help now. "Start the evacuation protocol," he said quietly. "Every human, every station, every outpost under Council control. We are leaving all of it." Helen pulled out her communication device. She pressed a few buttons and spoke clearly into it. Within minutes, the orders spread through all of human space like ripples in water. Ambassadors on distant stations began packing their belongings. Engineers powered down the systems they had built with their own hands. Doctors transferred their patient files to local staff. Trade representatives canceled their contracts. The message was the same everywhere. Humanity was withdrawing from the Galactic Council. It would happen immediately. There would be no delays, there would be no big speeches, no dramatic final words in the council chamber, no long explanations about why this was happening. Humanity would simply leave. It would be quiet, like leaving a party where nobody really wanted you there in the first place. "The council will call for us," Helen said. She looked worried. "They will demand that we come and explain ourselves before the full assembly." Daniel smiled, but there was no happiness in it. "Let them call. There will be nobody left to answer their summons." The evacuation took 3 days. Human ships arrived at every station, every outpost, every facility where humans worked. They loaded people and personal belongings. They took their records and their research. But they did not take anything that belonged to the Council. They did not damage anything. They did not steal anything. They simply collected their people and left. On the 3rd day, the last human ship departed from Council space. Behind them, they left empty offices. They left dark laboratories. They left silent workshops. The systems humans had built kept running on automatic programs. Everything looked normal at first glance. But there were no humans left to fix things when they broke down. There were no humans left to improve things or solve new problems. Daniel stood on the bridge of the lead ship as they crossed the border out of Council space. Helen stood beside him. Neither of them spoke for a long time. They just watched the stars. "Do you think they will understand?" Helen finally asked. "Do you think they will realize what they have lost?" Daniel thought about that question. He thought about the power grids that would start failing. He thought about the medical equipment that would stop working properly. He thought about the communication networks that would begin to have problems. All of those things depended on human maintenance, even if the Council did not realize it yet. "They will understand," Daniel said. "Eventually. But by then it will be too late." The human fleet continued its journey toward home. Earth was waiting for them. The human government had approved this plan months ago, after the Council rejected their plea for help. It was not a decision made in anger or haste. It was calculated and careful. Humanity had prepared for this moment. Behind them, in Council space, things seemed normal for a few more hours. The Council members went about their business. They held their meetings. They made their decisions. They did not notice that the humans were gone. Not yet. But soon someone would try to contact a human engineer about a problem. Someone would look for a human doctor for a medical question. Someone would need a human programmer to fix a computer issue. And they would find nobody there. The offices would be empty. The communicators would go unanswered, and then the council would begin to realize what had happened. They would begin to understand the mistake they had made. But understanding would not bring the humans back. Nothing would bring them back. Daniel looked at the navigation display. They would reach Earth in 2 weeks. 2 weeks to cross the space between the council and home. It seemed like such a short distance now, but it would become an impossible distance for the council to cross. Because humanity would make sure of that. Send the final message, Daniel told the communications officer. Let them know we are gone. The officer nodded and typed on his console. A simple message was sent to every council communication channel. It was brief and clear. Humanity has withdrawn from the Galactic Council. We will not return. Do not attempt to contact us, that was all. No explanations. No accusations. No demands. Just a statement of fact. Helen looked at Daniel with concern in her eyes. What if we are wrong? What if leaving makes things worse? Daniel understood her worry. This decision would affect billions of lives, human and alien alike. But he also knew that staying would have been worse. If we stay, we become their servants forever. They will never see us as equals. They will use us until we have nothing left to give. At least this way we choose our own path. The ship moved through space quietly. Around them, the other human ships kept formation. Thousands of ships, carrying hundreds of thousands of humans home. It was the largest human fleet ever assembled. And it was running away from the galactic community, not toward it. But Daniel did not see it as running away. He saw it as choosing dignity over servitude. He saw it as choosing self-respect over approval. The council had treated humanity like children. They had treated human achievements as minor contributions. They had dismissed human concerns as unimportant. Now they would learn what it meant to lose humanity. Now they would learn the true value of what they had taken for granted. Daniel turned away from the window and walked to his office. There was still work to do. Earth needed to be ready for what came next. The barrier needed to be activated. The defense systems needed to be prepared. Humanity was closing its doors to the galaxy. Those doors would not open again until the galaxy was ready to treat humans as equals. And that day might never come. Council Director Vexthor sat in his office on Council Station Prime. He was a krill, tall and thin with gray skin and 4 arms. He had led the council for 20 years. Nothing ever surprised him anymore. Or so he thought. The lights in his office flickered. Just for a second. Vexthor looked up from his work. The lights flickered again. That had never happened before. Council Station Prime had perfect power. It had been built 3,000 years ago and maintained perfectly since then. He pressed the button to call the chief engineer. What is wrong with the power system? The engineer's voice came through the speaker. Nothing is wrong, Director. Just a small fluctuation. It will not happen again. But it did happen again. 3 days later, the medical center reported equipment failures. Machines that had worked for decades suddenly stopped working correctly. The life support system on the main trade hub started using too much power for no clear reason. Communication relays began dropping messages. Little problems, nothing major, but they kept happening. Counselor Brightwinds of the Avari came to see Vexthor a week after the humans left. The Avari were bird-like creatures with golden feathers and sharp eyes. Brightwinds was angry. Where are the human technicians? She demanded. The ones who maintained the medical equipment? We need them immediately. The equipment is failing and our engineers cannot fix it. Vexthor felt something cold settle in his stomach. What do you mean the humans maintained that equipment? We have Avari engineers. We have krill technicians. Brightwinds made an angry sound. Yes, we have engineers. But they do not understand how the systems work. The humans redesigned everything 5 years ago. They made it better, more efficient. But now that the humans are gone, we cannot maintain it. We do not understand their designs. Vexthor called an emergency meeting with all department heads. What he learned frightened him. Over 50 years, humans had quietly integrated themselves into every part of council operations. They had not done it through force or politics. They had simply volunteered for jobs nobody else wanted. They had solved problems that others had given up on. They had made themselves useful in 1,000 small ways, and now they were all gone. The chief engineer explained the situation. The humans did not just maintain our systems, Director. They improved them constantly. Every week they made small adjustments. Every month they optimized something. We have records of what they did, but we do not understand why they did it. Their solutions are too complex for us to reverse engineer quickly. Vexthor stood up from his chair. Send a diplomatic ship to Earth. We need to negotiate their return. Offer them whatever they want. Better seats on the council, more voting power, anything. The diplomatic ship left 2 days later. It carried the council's best negotiators. They had authority to make almost any deal. They expected to return within a month with good news. 3 weeks later, the ship returned early. The chief negotiator came directly to Vexthor's office. His face was pale. We could not reach Earth, Director. The entire Sol system is surrounded by some kind of energy barrier. We tried to communicate with it, but we only received an automated message. What did it say? Vexthor asked. Though he already knew it would be bad news, the negotiator read from a datapad. Humanity has withdrawn from galactic affairs. Do not attempt to breach this barrier. This is your only warning. That was all it said. The same message repeated over and over. Vexthor dismissed the negotiator and sat alone in his office, a barrier around their entire star system. That level of technology should not exist. The Council had the most advanced technology in the galaxy. At least they thought they did. Now it seemed the humans had technology far beyond what they had shown. The problems got worse every day. The Vryn delegation reported that their medical facilities were failing. They used human-designed medical nanites, tiny machines that worked inside the body. Without humans to maintain the production systems, the nanites were becoming unstable. People were getting sick again. The plague that humans had cured was coming back. The Talkesh corporate networks were crashing. Human programmers had spent 20 years optimizing their trading systems. Now those systems were making mistakes. Big mistakes. Entire corporations were losing massive amounts of money. The Talkesh economy started to shake. Even the Council's own archives were having problems. Humans had digitized millions of old records over the past 30 years. Now those digital files were corrupting. Ancient knowledge was disappearing. The archivists were panicking. Counselor Zix of the Harmonious Collective attended the next council session. The collective were beings of pure energy, contained in crystal shells. Zix spoke in musical tones. Can we not simply study what the humans built? Surely we can learn to maintain these systems ourselves. The chief engineer addressed the full council. We have tried, Counselor. The humans did not just build systems. They understood them in ways we are still trying to comprehend. Every solution they created was unique. They did not use standard approaches. They invented new approaches for each problem. It will take us decades to reverse engineer even a small part of their work. Vexthor looked around the council chamber. For the first time in his 20 years as director, he saw fear on the faces of the other counselors. They were beginning to understand. The humans had not just left. They had removed the foundation that the entire council had been built on. And nobody had noticed that foundation existed until it was gone. How long do we have? Vexthor asked quietly. How long until critical systems fail completely? The chief engineer looked down. 18 months, Director. Maybe less. After that, the power grids will collapse. Medical systems will shut down. Communication networks will fall apart. Food distribution will stop working. The council will not be able to function. Silence filled the chamber. Nobody spoke for a long time. Finally, Brightwind stood up. We must force them to return. Send our military fleet to Earth, break through their barrier, capture their leaders, make them fix what they have broken. Some counselors agreed. Others shook their heads. Vexthor thought about it carefully. Using force against the humans seemed wrong. But what choice did they have? The entire council civilization was collapsing. Billions of lives were at risk. Prepare the fleet, Vexthor said. But this is a diplomatic mission, not a military one. We will show strength, but we will not attack unless they attack first. Surely the humans will see reason. Surely they will not let billions die over a political dispute. The council fleet assembled over the next month. It was the largest military force the council had gathered in 500 years. 3,000 ships carrying the best weapons and the best warriors from all 17 member species. It was an impressive sight. Vexthor watched them depart on his office screen. He felt uneasy. Something about this felt wrong, but he pushed that feeling aside. The council needed the humans. That was a simple fact. The humans would understand that. They had to understand that. The fleet reached Sol System 2 weeks later. They lined up in formation outside the barrier. The fleet commander sent a message through all frequencies. We represent the Galactic Council. We demand that you open your barrier and allow diplomatic talks. The Council requires your immediate assistance with critical systems failures. This is not a request. This is a demand. The barrier did not respond. It just hung there in space, a wall of shimmering energy that surrounded the entire star system. The fleet waited for an hour. Then the commander gave an order. Fire warning shots. Show them we are serious. A dozen ships fired their weapons at empty space near the barrier. The weapons' blasts lit up the darkness. They were meant to be a show of force, nothing more. The barrier responded instantly. It expanded outward in a wave. The wave touched the council ships and they vanished. Not destroyed, not scattered. They simply ceased to exist as if they had never been there at all. 3,000 ships, gone in seconds. Only one small scout ship survived far at the back of the formation. The scout ship received a message. It came through every system on the ship at once, impossible to block or ignore. Return to the council, tell them what happened here, and tell them this is the only warning they will receive. The scout ship ran back to council space as fast as its engines could push it. The news of the fleet's destruction spread through council space like fire. 3,000 ships gone in an instant. Hundreds of thousands of warriors and crew simply erased from existence. No wreckage. No survivors except for one scout ship that had witnessed everything. Vex Thor stood before the emergency council session. He looked older than his years. The weight of his mistakes pressed down on him like a physical thing. We have underestimated humanity, he said quietly. Badly, but the council had bigger problems now. The 18 months the engineers predicted had been optimistic. Systems were failing faster than expected. 6 months after humanity left, the Vryn colonies declared an emergency. The plague had returned with terrible speed. Without the medical nanites, millions of Vryn were dying. Their hospitals were overwhelmed. Their doctors had forgotten how to treat the disease the old way. The Talkesh economy collapsed completely. Their automated trading systems made worse and worse mistakes. Banks failed. Corporations went bankrupt overnight. Entire family dynasties that had existed for thousands of years lost everything. The Talkesh people began to riot in the streets. Their government could not control them. Then came the worst disaster of all. The Krill Defense Network failed to detect a massive asteroid heading toward their industrial homeworld. Human engineers had calibrated those sensors 20 years ago and maintained them ever since. Now the calibration was drifting. By the time the Krill spotted the asteroid, it was too late to stop it. The asteroid hit Krill Prime at tremendous speed. The impact was visible from space as a bright flash of light. 3 billion Krill died in seconds. Cities turned to dust. Oceans boiled away. The planet's crust cracked open. Vex Thor watched it happen on a live feed. He watched his homeworld die because of a failure in systems that humans had maintained. Council Station Prime itself was dying too. The life support systems were failing one section at a time. First, the outer rings lost pressure. Then the temperature controls stopped working in the residential areas. Finally, the air recyclers began to shut down. The council had to evacuate everyone to backup facilities. After 3,000 years, the Great Council chamber stood empty and dark. The emergency session met in a small, temporary facility. It was cramped and uncomfortable. The crystal towers and grand halls were gone. Now they sat in a prefabricated building that felt like a warehouse. It was humiliating. But staying alive mattered more than pride. Counselor Brightwind stood up. Her golden feathers looked dull and ragged. She had lost family in the various disasters. We need the humans back. Whatever it takes, whatever they demand. We cannot survive without them. They will not answer our messages, Vex Thor said. His voice was hollow and tired. We have sent 600 different messages. We have tried every communication method we know. They ignore all of them. Then we must try something different, said Counselor Zix. Send one ship, one diplomat. Someone the humans knew and worked with. Someone who can plead our case person to person. Vex Thor thought about this. It was worth trying. I will go myself, he said. I led the council when we denied their request for help. This is my responsibility to fix. A small diplomatic shuttle carried Vex Thor to the Sol system. He went alone. No guards, no fleet. Just one old Krill in a small ship. approaching the barrier that had destroyed 3,000 warships. He stopped outside the barrier and broadcast a message. "This is Director Vexthor of the Krill. I come alone and unarmed. I wish to speak with Ambassador Daniel Morrison. I want to negotiate the return of humanity to the Council. Please let me through. Let me speak with you." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a section of the barrier opened. A single human ship emerged. It was small and sleek, nothing like the bulky Council vessels. It approached Vexthor's shuttle and sent a docking request. Vexthor docked his ship and crossed into the human vessel. Ambassador Daniel Morrison was waiting for him. The human looked the same as Vexthor remembered, perhaps a bit older. His expression was neutral and calm. "Director Vexthor," Daniel said, "I did not expect to see you here personally." "My people are dying," Vexthor said. "All our people are dying. The Vryn plague has returned. The Talkesh economy has collapsed. My own homeworld was destroyed by an asteroid we did not detect. Billions are dead. Billions more will die. We need your help, please." Daniel gestured to a seat. They both sat down. "I know about all of this," Daniel said. "We have been monitoring Council space. We know about every failure, every death, every disaster. Then why do you not help us?" Vexthor demanded. "You have the knowledge. You have the technology. You could stop this suffering with a single word." Daniel looked at him steadily. "Do you remember the Outer Colony crisis? When human settlements were dying and we asked the Council for help?" Vexthor felt shame burn through him. "Yes, I remember. The Council voted to deny your request. I voted to deny it. 20,000 humans died," Daniel said quietly. 20,000 men, women, and children. They died slowly over months while we begged the Council for the medical supplies and equipment we needed. Equipment the Council had plenty of. Supplies that would have been easy to share. But the Council said no. The Council said humanity needed to learn its place. Vexthor could not meet Daniel's eyes. "I'm sorry. That decision was wrong. I see that now. But punishing the entire galaxy for our mistake is equally wrong. Billions will die. Surely you do not want that." Daniel stood up and walked to a window that looked out at Earth in the distance. "You are right. We do not want billions to die. But we also cannot save you. If we return now, nothing will change. The Council will use us again. You will become dependent on us again. And in 50 more years, when we ask for help with something, you will deny us again. The cycle will continue. We could make it different this time," Vexthor said desperately. "We could give humanity full Council membership. Equal voting rights. Equal representation." "You could promise that," Daniel agreed. "But promises mean nothing. The Council made promises to humanity before. You broke them. Words are cheap. Actions matter." Daniel turned back to face Vexthor. "Here is the truth. For 50 years, humanity held back. We could have introduced technologies that would have changed everything. We could have taken control of entire sectors. We could have demanded power and resources. But we chose cooperation instead. We chose peace. We chose to help quietly, without demanding recognition or reward. You never asked why our solutions worked so well. You never wondered why a young species could solve problems that had troubled you for millennia. You simply accepted our help and looked down on us anyway. You took our contributions for granted." Daniel's voice grew harder. "Now your systems are failing because you never bothered to understand them. You built your civilization on a foundation you did not maintain. We did not sabotage anything. We simply stopped holding you up. And now you see how much you relied on us. So what do we do?" Vexthor asked. "Just die? Give up? Is that what you want?" "No," Daniel said firmly. "We want you to survive, but you must do it yourselves. You must learn. You must struggle. You must grow. That is the only way you will become truly independent. If we save you now, you learn nothing. The cycle continues." Daniel walked Vexthor back to the airlock. "Goodbye, Director. When your civilizations have learned to stand on their own, when you have proven that you can survive without us, then perhaps we will talk again. Until then, do not contact us. Do not approach our barrier. Focus on saving yourselves." Vexthor returned to his shuttle. As he flew back to Council space, he thought about everything Daniel had said. The human was right. The Council had taken humanity for granted. They had used humans like tools, and now they were paying the price for that arrogance. But Daniel had also said something important. He said when the civilizations learned to stand on their own, humanity might talk to them again. There was hope. Not immediate hope, not easy hope, but hope nonetheless. Vexthor made his report to the council. He told them everything Daniel had said. Some counselors became angry, some became despairing, but a few, like Vexthor himself, began to understand. They had a long, hard road ahead, but it was the only road available to them now. 3 years had passed since humanity closed its borders. The galaxy looked very different now. The Great Galactic Council no longer existed. It had broken apart into dozens of smaller groups. Each species struggled to survive on its own. The Vryn plague continued to spread. Half their population had died. The other half lived in constant fear. Vryn doctors worked day and night to find a cure. They studied the old human nanites, trying to understand how they worked. Progress was slow and painful, but it was progress. The Talkesh economy never recovered to what it had been. But the Talkesh people learned something important from their collapse. Their old economy had been based on taking advantage of others. Now they were building something new, something based on fair trade and cooperation. It was smaller, less powerful, but it was more honest. The Krill suffered most of all. The loss of their homeworld broke something in their culture. Billions of Krill became refugees. They scattered across the galaxy, living in camps and temporary settlements. Many lost hope, but some Krill began to rebuild. They started studying sensor technology from scratch. They were determined that an asteroid would never catch them unprepared again. Vexthor lived in one of those refugee camps. He had lost his title as director. He had lost his position and power, but he gained something else. Time to think, time to study, time to understand what had really happened. He spent months analyzing everything humanity had done during their 50 years in the council. He read every report. He studied every project. He examined every solution the humans had implemented. Slowly, a pattern emerged. The humans had not sabotaged anything. They had not built deliberate weaknesses into council systems. Instead, they had done exactly what they said they would do. They had fixed problems. They had improved systems. They had made everything work better. But they had done it in a way that required human knowledge to maintain. It was brilliant and terrible at the same time. The humans had created dependencies without anyone noticing, not through evil plans or tricks, just through competence. They had become necessary because they were good at what they did, and the council had let them, because it was easier than learning to do those things themselves. But what haunted Vexthor most was something else. The humans had tried to warn them. He found it in the old reports. Every year, human ambassadors had submitted documents showing how critical human contributions had become. They had recommended that council species learn human methods. They had offered training programs. They had practically begged the council to pay attention. The council had ignored every warning. Vexthor himself had dismissed those reports as human exaggeration. He had thought the humans were just trying to make themselves seem more important. Now he understood. The humans had not been exaggerating. If anything, they had been understating the problem. One day, as Vexthor sat in his small shelter studying old files, someone knocked on his door. He opened it and froze in surprise. Helen Carter stood outside. The former human deputy ambassador looked older, like everyone did these days. But she still carried herself with quiet confidence. "May I come in?" Helen asked politely. Vexthor stepped aside and let her enter. His shelter was tiny and cramped. One room with a bed, a desk, and a small food preparation area. He felt embarrassed at how far he had fallen. But Helen did not seem to judge him. She just sat down when he offered her a chair. "Why are you here?" Vexthor asked. "Come to see how the mighty have fallen." Helen shook her head. "I came to deliver a message, and to see how you are doing. Ambassador Morrison remembered that you treated him with respect, even when the rest of the council did not. He wanted you to know that humanity does not take pleasure in your suffering. But you will not help us either," Vexthor said bitterly. "You watch us struggle and die while you could stop it with a word." Helen was quiet for a moment. "Let me ask you something. If a parent does everything for their child, what happens to that child? If the parent solves every problem, makes every decision, prevents every failure, what kind of adult does that child become?" Vexthor thought about it. "They become weak, unable to handle problems on their own." "Exactly," Helen said. For 50 years, humanity was that overprotective parent. We solved your problems. We fixed your systems. We made everything easier for you. And you became dependent on us. If we come back now and save you, what happens? You become dependent again. Nothing changes. The cycle continues. So you let billions die to teach us a lesson. Vexthor's voice was sharp with anger. Helen met his eyes steadily. No, we are letting you learn to save yourselves. There is a difference. Look around you, Vexthor. What do you see in this camp? Vexthor looked out his small window. He saw Krill engineers working on a water purification system. He saw them arguing about the best way to fix it. He saw them trying different solutions, failing, trying again. They were learning. I see my people struggling, Vexthor said. You see your people learning, Helen corrected gently. 3 years ago, those engineers would have called for human help at the first sign of a problem. Now they are solving it themselves. It is hard, it is slow, many mistakes will be made, but they are growing. They are becoming independent. She stood up to leave. Humanity almost destroyed itself several times in our history. We had wars that killed billions. We nearly poisoned our own planet. We created weapons that could have ended all life on Earth, but we survived those trials. We learned from them. We became stronger. Now it is your turn. And if we do not survive? Vexthor asked quietly. Helen paused at the door. Then you were not meant to thrive in this galaxy. That sounds cruel, but it is the truth. The universe is hard. It does not care about fairness. Species either adapt and survive or they do not. Humanity cannot protect you forever. We should not have protected you as long as we did. She looked back at him with something like sympathy in her eyes. But I do not think you will fail. I see Krill engineers learning. I see Vrin doctors innovating. I see Talkesh traders cooperating instead of exploiting. You are changing. It is painful, but you are changing. Keep going. Do not give up. After Helen left, Vexthor sat alone for a long time. He thought about what she had said. He thought about the engineers outside his window. He thought about the Vrin doctors working to cure the plague. He thought about the Talkesh building a new economy. They were all struggling, but they were all moving forward. Vexthor made a decision. He was done feeling sorry for himself. He was done wishing for humanity to save them. It was time to save themselves. He stood up, left his shelter, and walked over to where the engineers were working on the water purification system. Can I help? He asked them. The engineers looked surprised. Vexthor had been a council director. He had never done manual work. But one of them handed him a tool and showed him what needed to be done. Vexthor got to work. He did not know what he was doing. He made mistakes. The other engineers had to correct him. But he kept trying. And slowly, very slowly, he began to understand how the system worked, not because someone explained it to him, but because he was actually doing the work himself. That night, the water system started working again. It was not perfect. It was not as good as when humans maintained it. But it worked. The Krill engineers celebrated. They had done it themselves. Vexthor felt something he had not felt in 3 years. Hope. Real hope. Not hope that someone would rescue them. Hope that they could rescue themselves. Around the galaxy, similar stories were playing out. The Vrin finally made a breakthrough on a new medical treatment. It was not as good as the human nanites, but it worked. The Talkesh opened trade routes based on mutual benefit instead of exploitation. The younger species, forced to innovate or die, made technological leaps that would have seemed impossible just years before. They were learning. Slowly and painfully, but they were learning, and that was exactly what humanity had wanted all along. Vexthor looked up at the stars that night. Somewhere out there, beyond the human barrier, Earth waited. Humanity watched and monitored, but did not interfere. They had made their choice. Now the galaxy had to make its choice too. Survive or perish. Learn or fail. Stand alone or fall forever. Vexthor chose to stand. He chose to learn. He chose to survive. And he would spend every remaining day of his life helping his people do the same. 20 years had passed since humanity withdrew from galactic affairs. The galaxy had transformed completely. The old Galactic Council existed only in history files now. New alliances had formed. Dozens of smaller governments had emerged, each one independent and self-sufficient. The Vrin had developed their own medical technology. It was different from what humans had created. It used biological approaches instead of nanites, but it worked just as well. The plague was finally under control. Vryn doctors now taught other species their methods. They had become teachers instead of patients. The Talkesh built a new economy from the ruins of the old one. This new economy was based on cooperation and fair trade. It was smaller than before. The Talkesh were not as rich as they used to be. But their society was healthier. Their people were happier. They had learned that wealth without fairness was worthless. The Krill had rebuilt their sensor networks from scratch. They studied human designs but did not copy them. Instead, they used those designs as inspiration to create something new. Their new sensors were different but just as effective. And most importantly, the Krill understood how they worked. No asteroid would ever catch them unprepared again. The younger species had made the biggest leaps. Forced to innovate or die, they had developed technologies that seemed impossible just 2 decades before. They had learned what humanity had always known. Necessity was the greatest teacher. Struggle was the best school. Vexthor was old now. His gray skin had faded to almost white. His forearms moved slowly. But his mind remained sharp. He served as a historical advisor to the new Krill assembly. His job was to make sure the new generation never forgot the lessons the old generation had learned so painfully. One morning, Vexthor received a message through channels that had not been used in 20 years. Channels that humanity had created long ago. His hand shook as he opened it. The message was simple and brief. An invitation to visit Sol system. No demands, no conditions. Just an invitation. Vexthor immediately contacted the other species. The news spread quickly. Humanity was opening communications again. After 20 years of silence, they were willing to talk. The question was, why now? What had changed? A delegation formed within days. Representatives from every major species came together. But this delegation was different from the old council. These representatives were equals. There was no hierarchy. No species claimed superiority over others. They had learned that lesson well. The journey to Sol took 2 weeks. As they approached the system, the delegation held their breath. The barrier was still there, but as they got closer, it simply faded away. It disappeared like morning fog in sunlight. The way was open. Human ships came out to meet them. The ships were sleek and advanced, showing technology far beyond what the rest of the galaxy possessed. But the humans did not display their power threateningly. They simply guided the delegation to Earth. Earth looked more beautiful than anyone remembered. The planet practically glowed with life. Cities sparkled on the surface. Orbital stations ringed the world like jewels. It was clear that humanity had spent the last 20 years building and growing. They had not stagnated behind their barrier. Ambassador Daniel Morrison greeted them at the main orbital station. He was much older now. His hair had gone completely white. Lines marked his face, but his eyes were still sharp and his handshake was still firm. Behind him stood Helen Carter, also aged but still commanding respect. "Welcome," Daniel said warmly. "It is good to see all of you again." Vexthor stepped forward. He was the eldest member of the delegation. He spoke for all of them. "Why now? Why invite us back after 20 years? Daniel gestured to a large viewing screen. It showed images of the galaxy, images of Vryn hospitals treating patients, images of Talkesh trading fairly with other species, images of Krill sensor stations watching the stars, images of young species innovating and creating. "Because you are ready," Daniel said simply. "You have learned to solve your own problems. You have developed your own technologies. You have built your own societies. You stand on your own feet now. That means we can meet as partners, as equals, not as teachers and students." Helen stepped forward. "We have been watching. We are impressed with what you have accomplished. The medical advances, the economic reforms, the technological innovations. You did all of that without us. You should be very proud." The Vryn representative spoke up. Her voice was bitter. "Many died. Billions across all our worlds. Was that necessary? Could you not have helped us while still teaching us independence?" Daniel's expression became serious and sad. "We have asked ourselves that question every single day for 20 years. The honest answer is that we do not know. Perhaps there was a better way. Perhaps we could have helped more without creating dependency. We will never know for certain." He looked at each delegate in turn. "But we do know this. If we had stayed and continued as before, you would never have learned. You would have remained dependent on us forever. Every problem would have been solved by humans. Every innovation would have come from humans. You would have been our children forever, never growing into adults. That would not have been partnership. That would have been a prison for all of us. The Talkesh representative asked the next question. What do you want from us now? Why really invite us here? Helen smiled. We want nothing from you. Nothing at all. But we would like to offer you something. A choice. We can share our knowledge again if you want it. But this time it will be different. This time we will be equals and partners. Daniel nodded. We will not solve your problems for you. We will collaborate with you on solutions. We will not maintain your systems for you. We will teach you to maintain them yourselves. We will not lead you. We will walk beside you as companions. That is the only relationship we are interested in now. Vexthor looked at the other delegates. He saw the same emotions on every face. Anger at the past, hope for the future, and something else. Something that had not existed between their species and humanity before. Respect. Real respect between equals. We have terms of our own. Vexthor said slowly. If we are to be true partners, then we need to understand each other better. We need to know more about humanity, not just your technology or your achievements. Tell us about your failures. Tell us about your struggles. Tell us how you nearly destroyed yourselves. Help us understand how you became what you are today. Daniel smiled widely. It was a genuine smile, full of warmth. That is exactly the right question to ask. Come, let us talk. We have many stories to share. They are not always pleasant stories, but they are honest ones. We will tell you about our wars, our environmental disasters, our social conflicts, our near-extinction events, all of it. The delegates followed Daniel and Helen into the embassy building. It was smaller and simpler than the old embassy had been. There were no grand halls or impressive decorations, just comfortable rooms designed for conversation and work. Over the following weeks, humans and aliens talked. Really talked, for perhaps the first time ever. Humans shared their history honestly. They talked about the world wars that killed hundreds of millions. They talked about the environmental damage that nearly made Earth uninhabitable. They talked about the nuclear weapons that came close to ending all life on their planet. They talked about their failures and mistakes without trying to hide them. And the other species shared their own stories too. The Vryn talked about their ancient civil wars. The Talkesh admitted to exploiting younger species for profit. The Krill confessed to arrogance that had nearly destroyed them multiple times. Everyone had failures in their past. Everyone had lessons they had learned the hard way. Through these conversations, real understanding began to form. Not the shallow understanding of the old council days. Deep understanding. Understanding built on honesty and mutual respect. Vexthor sat with Daniel one evening, looking out at Earth below. We wasted 50 years, Vexthor said quietly. We could have had this partnership from the beginning. Instead, we treated you like servants. We threw away decades of potential cooperation. Daniel shook his head. No, you were not ready then. Neither were we, honestly. We were trying to prove ourselves. You were trying to maintain old hierarchies. Neither of us was ready for true partnership. Sometimes you have to go through fire before you can build something lasting. He looked at Vexthor with understanding in his eyes. The last 20 years were hard. For everyone. But look what came from it. Your species learned to stand alone. To innovate, to grow. Our species learned patience and restraint. Everyone became stronger. Sometimes the hard path is the only path that leads somewhere worth going. As the delegates prepared to return home, they carried with them something more valuable than technology or trade agreements. They carried understanding. They carried respect. They carried the foundation for a real partnership between equals. A new chapter in galactic history was beginning. Not one based on hierarchy and dependence. Not one where some species ruled over others. A chapter based on cooperation between equals. On mutual respect. On shared growth. The galaxy would never forget the cost of dismissing humanity. Billions had died. Civilizations had collapsed. Ancient institutions had crumbled. The price had been terrible, but the galaxy had learned something more important.